Admiral Catherine Vorath stood on the observation deck of the Celestial Authority, flagship of the unified Galactic Coalition, and watched the stars burn. 300 years of peace. 300 years of careful diplomacy, trade agreements, and mutual prosperity among the 17 recognized species of the Galactic Coalition. 300 years since the last Great War had scarred the Orion Arm and left entire systems as nothing more than graveyards of shattered worlds and frozen corpses. All of it, every treaty, every handshake, every carefully constructed alliance, now threatened by the emergence of an enemy that had no interest in diplomacy. The HFY War. They had appeared 6 months ago, seemingly from nowhere, emerging from the dark spaces between galaxies where no probe had ever ventured, no colony ship had ever dared to fly. Their first act upon entering Coalition space was to consume the Tellarian homeworld. 17 billion souls, gone in less than 3 standard days. Not killed in the traditional sense, the HFY War didn't believe in such merciful endings. They consumed, they absorbed. They took everything that a species was and added it to their collective, stripping away consciousness, identity, and hope. The Tellarians had been poets. They had written songs that could make hardened warriors weep. Their architecture had been studied across the galaxy as the pinnacle of aesthetic achievement. Now they were nothing but biomass, processed and incorporated into the ever-growing hive ships of the HFY War fleet. Admiral Vorath's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he reviewed the tactical display hovering before him. His species, the Vethkai, were known for their analytical minds and their ability to process complex battle scenarios. It was why he had been chosen to lead the Coalition's combined fleet, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. 12,000 warships. 47 species contributing vessels. The pride of the galaxy, gathered to make one final stand against the consuming darkness. And it wasn't enough. He knew it. Every admiral in the fleet knew it. The HFY War had swept through 17 systems in 6 months, absorbing 11 colony worlds and 3 homeworlds. Every fleet sent against them had been destroyed utterly. Every defensive line had crumbled. Every strategy had failed. The enemy possessed technology that the Coalition couldn't comprehend. Their ships healed themselves within minutes of taking damage. Their weapons bypassed shields as if they didn't exist. Their numbers seemed infinite, each battle seeing more and more hive ships emerging from those impossible dark spaces between stars. "Admiral," a voice called from behind him, "the Strategic Council is assembled. They await your presence." Vorath turned to face his aide, a young Kelthian named Sivris. The amphibian species was known for their diplomatic skills, but Sivris had chosen military service instead. Vorath had often wondered what had driven such a peaceful being to war. Now, he supposed, that question answered itself. The HFY War didn't care about peace. They didn't care about diplomacy. They cared only about consumption. "Have there been any responses to our final transmission?" Vorath asked, already knowing the answer. Sivris's gills fluttered, a sign of distress. "No, Admiral. The Sol system remains silent." Of course they did. Humanity. The one species in the galaxy that had rejected Coalition membership. The one species that had looked at the carefully constructed order of 17 civilizations and said, simply, "No thank you." No one understood why. The humans had made contact with the Coalition 73 years ago, when one of their primitive explorer vessels had stumbled into Vethkai space. They had been welcomed, educated about galactic politics, and offered membership in the most prosperous alliance in known history. They had declined. Not rudely, not aggressively, they had simply and politely declined. Their ambassador, a surprisingly young female named Sarah Chen, had smiled warmly and explained that humanity preferred to chart its own course. They would trade with the coalition. They would share cultural exchanges. They would even participate in scientific collaborations. But they would not join. They would not share their military technology. They would not allow coalition vessels into their core systems. They would remain independent. The coalition had accepted this, though with confusion and no small amount of condescension. The humans were a young species, after all. Barely 3,000 years of recorded civilization, and only 300 years of faster-than-light travel. They would learn. They would eventually understand that independence was a luxury that young species couldn't afford in a galaxy full of dangers. But 73 years had passed, and the humans remained stubbornly, inexplicably independent. When the HFY emerged, the coalition had immediately reached out to humanity, hoping that this shared threat would finally bring them into the fold. Surely the humans would see reason now. Surely they would understand that survival required unity. The humans had sent a single message in response. We have received your request. We are observing the situation. Should we determine intervention is necessary, we will act accordingly. Until then, we wish you fortune in your endeavors. And then, nothing. 6 months of silence while the HFY consumed world after world. 6 months of increasingly desperate pleas for assistance. 6 months of watching the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy fall like grain before a harvester. The humans won't help us, Vorath said quietly. We need to accept that. Admiral, the Council is waiting, Siverus reminded him gently. Vorath nodded and straightened his uniform. It was time to inform the leaders of 47 species that they were almost certainly going to die. The Strategic Council was held in the Celestial Authority's Grand Chamber, a circular room designed to accommodate representatives from every coalition species. Holographic projections allowed beings of vastly different sizes and environmental requirements to participate equally. As Vorath entered, he was greeted by the cacophony of a dozen simultaneous translations. The Vorthkai clicked and whistled in their ultrasonic language. The Gelthians bubbled their responses through specialized fluid tanks. The Meridians communicated through rapid color changes that had to be interpreted by AI systems. Unity in diversity. That had been the Coalition's motto for 3 centuries. Now, Vorath thought bitterly, it might become their epitaph. Admirals, commanders, honored representatives, he began, his voice carrying through the universal translator systems. Thank you for gathering on such short notice. I will be direct, as our time is limited. He activated the central holographic display, and a star map materialized above the council table. Red dots indicated HFY-controlled systems. Blue dots indicated remaining coalition territories. There was far more red than blue. Our scouts have confirmed that the HFY main fleet is currently positioned in the Thessalian Nebula, approximately 47 light-years from our current position. Based on their movement patterns, we estimate they will reach the Kelthian homeworld within 6 standard days. Gasps and exclamations rippled through the chamber. The Kelthians were one of the founding species of the Coalition. Their world was ancient, beautiful, and home to nearly 40 billion souls. We cannot allow another homeworld to fall, Vorath continued. The Strategic Council has determined that we will make our stand at the Kelthian system. Our combined fleet will engage the HFY in open battle. Grand Admiral Teresa Vox of the Meridian Republic raised a tendril, the equivalent of requesting the floor. Admiral Vorath, with respect, every fleet that has engaged the Kethvor has been destroyed. What makes us believe this engagement will be different? Because this time, we fight together, Vorath replied, though even he could hear the hollowness in his own words. 47 species, 12,000 warships, unified under a single command structure. The Kethvor have never faced such a force. The Kethvor have never needed to, Vox replied bluntly. Their ships regenerate faster than we can damage them. Their weapons cut through our shields like they're not there. And every time we destroy one of their vessels, 2 more appear to take its place. We're not fighting a fleet, Admiral. We're fighting a force of nature. Murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber. Then what would you have us do? Vorath demanded. Surrender? Allow them to consume us without resistance? Condemn our children to become nothing more than raw material for their endless expansion? Silence. I do not pretend that we will win this battle, Vorath admitted, his voice softening. I do not promise victory. I promise only that we will make them remember us. We will show them that the coalition, that the civilized species of this galaxy do not go quietly into darkness. We fight, we resist, and perhaps, in our resistance, we buy time for others to find a solution we could not. He paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of a dozen different species. He saw fear there, yes, but he also saw determination, pride, the stubborn refusal to submit that had allowed their ancestors to reach for the stars in the first place. In 6 days, we make our stand, he concluded. Let the Kethvor know that they have chosen the wrong galaxy to invade. The chamber erupted in cheers and battle cries, each species voicing their defiance in their own way. Vorath allowed himself a small smile. They would probably die, but they would die well. Part 2. Whispers from the Dark. 3 days before the battle, something changed. Vorath was in his quarters, attempting to compose a final message to his mate and their 3 offspring, when Sivris burst through the door without announcement, a violation of protocol that spoke to the severity of whatever news he carried. Admiral, you need to come to the Sensor Command Center immediately. Vorath was on his feet before his aide finished speaking. What is it? Have the Kethvor advanced their timeline? No, sir. Sivris's gills were fluttering so rapidly that Vorath feared the young officer might hyperventilate. It's the humans! The humans are coming! Vorath froze. What? Long-range sensors detected a massive energy signature approximately 4 hours ago emerging from the direction of Sol System. It's a fleet, Admiral, a human fleet. And, sir, Sivris paused, seemingly unable to believe his own words. Sir, you need to see the numbers. The Sensor Command Center was in chaos when Vorath arrived. Officers from a dozen different species crowded around holographic displays, speaking over each other in a babble of translated languages. The air, carefully balanced to accommodate multiple biological requirements, seemed thick with tension and something Vorath hadn't felt in months. Hope. Admiral on deck, someone shouted, and the chaos immediately resolved into disciplined silence. Report, Vorath ordered, striding to the primary tactical display. Senior Sensor Officer Keleth, a Vethkai like himself, stepped forward. Sir, approximately 4 hours ago, our long-range arrays detected a massive slipstream emergence signature, approximately 117 light-years from our current position, bearing relative 037 by 082, the direction of the Sol system.
How massive?
Caliph hesitated. Initially, we believed there was a sensor malfunction. The numbers didn't make sense.
What?
Numbers. Sir, we're detecting approximately 50,000 distinct vessel signatures.
Voroth felt his heart stutter. 50,000 ships? The entire coalition fleet numbered only 12,000. Even at the height of the last Great War, the combined fleets of all participating species had numbered only 23,000.
That's impossible, he breathed. The humans don't have those numbers. They can't have those numbers. They only control a handful of systems. That's what we thought, sir, but the signatures are confirmed. 52,317 distinct vessels, all broadcasting human identification codes. They're traveling at approximately 700 times the speed of light and will reach our position in approximately 71 hours. 700 times light speed? Vorath shook his head. Our fastest ships can manage 300. The Kethvor move at perhaps 400. How are the humans moving at 700? Unknown, sir. But that's not all. Caliph manipulated the display, and a new set of readings appeared. The lead vessels in the formation, sir, they're bigger than anything we've ever seen. Our sensors are having trouble resolving their exact dimensions, but the smallest of the lead ships appears to be approximately 40 kilometers in length. Vorath stared at the display, his analytical mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The largest coalition battleship, his own celestial authority, measured just over 5 kilometers. The largest Kethvor hive ship ever recorded was approximately 12 kilometers. The humans were fielding ships 40 kilometers long, and they were leading a fleet of over 50,000 vessels.
Have they responded to any hails?
Yes, sir. Approximately 90 minutes ago, we received a single transmission. Caliph activated the audio recording. A human voice filled the sensor command center, speaking in the flat, precise tones of military communication. Unified Galactic Coalition Forces. This is Admiral James Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We have received your calls for assistance and have determined that intervention is necessary. Our fleet is en route to your position and will arrive in approximately 71 hours. We ask that you hold your current position and await our arrival. Do not engage the Kethvor before we reach you. Repeat, do not engage. You'll just get in our way. Chen out. The recording ended. For a long moment, no one spoke. Chen, Vorath murmured. Sarah Chen was their ambassador 70 years ago. A relative, perhaps? Unknown, sir. But did he say we would get in their way? Vorath found himself smiling. The first genuine smile he'd allowed himself in months. Yes, he did. He turned to face the gathered officers. Send word to all fleet commanders. The humans are coming. We will hold our position and await their arrival. Sir, Kelith said carefully, do we even know if the humans can fight the Kethvor? They've never faced an enemy like this. Vorath looked at the sensor display, at those impossible numbers, at the ship signatures that dwarfed anything in Coalition records. I don't know what the humans are, he admitted, but I'm very curious to find out. Over the next 71 hours, the mystery of humanity only deepened. Coalition intelligence had always assumed that humanity was a minor power, a young species that had achieved faster-than-light travel through luck as much as skill. They controlled only 19 star systems, after all. Their population was estimated at perhaps 40 billion, respectable for a species of their age, but nothing compared to the multi-trillion populations of the elder species. But as the Terran fleet drew closer,
Vorath began to realize that the coalition had made a fundamental error. They had assumed. They had looked at the small number of human systems visible to coalition sensors and assumed that was the extent of human territory. They had noted the human reluctance to share military technology and assumed it was because they had little to share. They had observed human ships traveling at speeds comparable to coalition vessels and assumed that was the limit of their capabilities. Assumption after assumption, built on the arrogant belief that the coalition understood the galaxy better than any newcomer possibly could.
Now those assumptions were crumbling. "We've done a more detailed analysis of the approaching fleet," Keleth reported during one of the many briefings Vorath had called over the intervening days. "The results are concerning."
Concerning how?
Concerning in that they don't make sense. Keleth activated the display. The human fleet appears to be organized into 12 battle groups, each containing approximately 4,000 warships. Each battle group is led by a command vessel of the type we originally detected, ships ranging from 40 to 70 kilometers in length.
70 kilometers? Vorath felt slightly dizzy. But that's not what's concerning, Keleth continued. What's concerning is the variety we're seeing. Admiral, we've identified over 300 distinct ship classes in the human fleet. They're not fielding a standardized military force. They're fielding everything.
What do you mean, everything?
Keleth manipulated the display, and images began to appear. Ship silhouettes captured by long-range optical sensors. Some were sleek and predatory, built along lines that seemed designed for speed. Others were massive and blocky, bristling with what could only be weapon systems. Still others were curved and elegant, their purposes unclear. "We're seeing designs that appear to be optimized for completely different types of warfare," Keleth explained. "Some ships appear to be missile carriers. Others look like energy weapon platforms. We've identified what we believe are drone carriers, electronic warfare vessels, siege ships, and at least 40 ships that don't match any classification we have." And they're all coming here? All 50,000?
"Yes, sir." Keleth paused. "There's one more thing. We've been monitoring human communications during their approach. They're not using encryption."
Vorath frowned. "That's reckless. If the Kethvar intercept—"
"I don't think the humans care if the Kethvar intercept, sir. I think they want them to intercept." Kelith's expression was troubled. "We've been listening to their internal communications. Admiral, the humans aren't nervous. They're not treating this as a desperate last stand. They're treating it like..."
Like what?
"Like they're going on a hunt." The human fleet arrived on schedule, 71 hours after the initial contact. Vorath watched from the observation deck of the Celestial Authority as ships began emerging from slipspace in numbers that defied comprehension. The sky itself seemed to ripple and tear as vessel after vessel materialized, each one larger and more imposing than anything the coalition had ever fielded. And they just kept coming. First, the escort vessels. Ships that the humans apparently considered small, but that were equal in size to coalition cruisers. They spread out in precise formation, creating a defensive perimeter around the emergence point. Then, the main fleet elements. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships. Each class of vessel dwarfing its coalition equivalent. Their hulls were dark, almost black, and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Running lights traced patterns across their surfaces, but otherwise, they were shadows given form. And finally, the command vessels. Vorath had thought he was prepared for their size. The sensor data had been clear, but seeing them with his own eyes was something else entirely.
The lead ship, which his sensors identified as the TNS Manifest Destiny, was not simply a vessel. It was a mobile fortress, a construct so vast that it seemed to bend the fabric of space around it. Weapon systems covered its surface like scales on some enormous predator. Hangar bays gaped open along its flanks, revealing glimpses of the thousands of smaller craft it carried within. 47 kilometers of steel, ceramic, and focused malevolence. And there were 11 more just like it.
"Admiral," Sivris said quietly, "the human flagship is hailing us." Vorath straightened his uniform. "Put it through."
The main view screen flickered, and Vorath found himself looking at a human face for the first time in his life. Admiral James Chen was old by human standards. His hair had gone silver, and lines marked his face like the scars of many battles. But his eyes were sharp and alert, and he carried himself with the absolute confidence of someone who had never known defeat.
"Admiral Vorath," Chen said, "I apologize for the delay in our arrival. There were some debates in the Council about whether intervention was appropriate." He smiled slightly. "I won the debate." Vorath found his voice. "Admiral Chen, on behalf of the Unified Galactic Coalition, I thank you for your assistance. I confess, we were uncertain whether you would come."
"We almost didn't," Chen admitted. "There were those who argued that the Coalition's problems were not our problems, that we should allow events to play out and protect only our own borders." His smile faded. "I disagree. The Kethvor are a threat to all sapient life. Their expansion cannot be permitted to continue."
"Then you know what we face?" "We know exactly what you face, Admiral. We've been studying the Kethvor since they first emerged 6 months ago. We've analyzed their technology, their biology, their behavior patterns." Chen leaned forward. "We've also been preparing." Vorath glanced at the tactical display, at the 52,000 vessels now holding position alongside his own fleet. Preparing how? "Admiral Vorath, I'm going to be honest with you. In the 73 years since humanity joined the galactic community, we've maintained what we call a strategic silence. We've allowed other species to underestimate us. We've allowed them to believe that we're a minor power, barely worth consideration." "Why?" "Because the galaxy is a dangerous place, and we didn't know who we could trust. Because we'd seen what happened to species that revealed their full capabilities before they were ready to defend them." "Because," Chen paused, "because we weren't sure we were the good guys." Vorath didn't understand. "I don't follow." Chen sighed. "Humanity has a history, Admiral. A bloody, terrible history of violence and conquest. We've spent the last 3 centuries trying to overcome that history, to build a better version of ourselves. But the capacity for destruction never leaves us. It's in our blood, in our bones, in the very core of who we are." He gestured at the massive fleet visible through the view screen behind him. "What you see here is not the full extent of our capability. It's not even close. This is what we were willing to bring to this fight. 52,000 ships from a fleet that numbers over 400,000. The 12 command vessels are the smallest of our capital ships. We left the larger ones at home because we didn't want to terrify you." Vorath felt his hearts stutter again. "Larger ones?" "Admiral, when the Kethvor emerged, we recognized them immediately. Not because we'd encountered them before, but because we recognized the pattern. They're what we call a consuming species, a civilization that exists only to grow, only to absorb, only to destroy. We've encountered the concept before, in our mythology, in our nightmares." Chen's eyes grew dark. "In our own history." "You've fought enemies like this before?" We were enemies like this once, a very long time ago. Chen straightened. The Kethvor believe they cannot be stopped because they have never encountered a species willing to match their cruelty, their ruthlessness, their absolute commitment to victory at any cost. They are about to learn that they have not been fighting predators.
What have they been fighting? Chen smiled, and there was nothing warm about it.
Prey. The combined fleet repositioned to the Thessalian Nebula, the location of the Kethvor main force. During the journey, Vorath found himself aboard the Manifest Destiny, invited by Admiral Chen to observe human tactical planning.
What he saw there disturbed him.
The human warship was unlike anything in the Coalition. Every surface seemed designed for efficiency, for utility, for war. There were no decorations, no displays of art or culture. Only weapons, systems, and the grim-faced crew members who operated them. And yet, beneath that stark exterior, Vorath sensed something else. Pride, determination, an almost religious devotion to duty. "You seem unsettled, Admiral," Chen observed as they walked through the command corridors.
Your ship is different from what I expected. Different how?
Vorath considered his words carefully. Coalition vessels are designed with multiple purposes in mind. They serve as diplomatic platforms, scientific research stations, even mobile habitats. Your vessel appears designed for only one purpose.
War, Chen agreed. Yes, our military vessels are not multi-purpose. They're not comfortable. They're not meant to be. He paused before a reinforced bulkhead and pressed his hand to a scanner. When the Coalition first contacted us, we hoped we could leave our warrior past behind. We hoped we could become what you already were, a peaceful civilization that used war only as a last resort.
The bulkhead slid open, revealing a massive chamber beyond. It was filled with holographic displays, tactical stations, and hundreds of human officers working in focused silence. But then we saw the galaxy as it truly was, Chen continued. We saw the Coalition's military strength and its limits. We saw the ruins of species that had been destroyed before the Coalition formed. We saw the dark spaces between stars where anything might lurk. He led Vorath to a raised platform overlooking the command center. So we made a decision. We would build two civilizations. One would face the galaxy, peaceful, curious, eager to learn and trade. The other would remain hidden, waiting, preparing. He gestured at the command center, for the day when humanity would be needed.
You've been preparing for war for 73 years?
Longer than that. We started preparing the moment we achieved faster-than-light travel. We always knew that the universe was dangerous, that somewhere out there, something like the Kethvor was waiting. Chen's voice grew quiet. We were right. Vorath studied the tactical displays. Even now, hours from the battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy, the human officers seemed calm, focused, as if this were nothing more than a training exercise. "Your people don't seem afraid," he observed. "Fear is a useful tool," Chen replied. "It keeps you alert, keeps you alive, but it cannot be allowed to control you. Every one of these officers has been trained from childhood for this moment. They know what's at stake, they know the risks, and they have accepted them." "Trained from childhood?" Chen met Vorath's eyes. "Admiral, the Coalition has always wondered why humanity refused to join, why we remained independent, why we kept our distance." He smiled grimly. "This is why.
because we knew that someday the galaxy would need something the Coalition couldn't provide, something that peaceful civilizations cannot create.
And what is that?
Monsters.
The Thessalian Nebula was beautiful.
Vast clouds of ionized gas stretched across light years, glowing in shades of crimson and gold. Stars were being born within those clouds, new suns that would burn for billions of years, nurturing new worlds, perhaps new civilizations.
It was also the staging ground for the largest HFY fleet ever recorded. Sensors are detecting approximately 18,000 HFY vessels, Kelleth reported from his station aboard the Celestial Authority. The majority are standard hive ships, ranging from 5 to 12 kilometers in length. But there's something new in the formation, something we haven't seen before.
The main display zoomed in on the center of the HFY formation, and Vorath felt his blood run cold.
It was a ship, if ship was even the right word. It was organic, like all HFY vessels, but its scale defied comprehension. Tentacles the size of moons extended from a central mass that must have been nearly 200 kilometers across. It pulsed with sickly bioluminescence, and even at this distance, Vorath could feel something like a whisper at the edge of his thoughts.
"What is that?" he breathed.
"We're not certain," Kelleth admitted, "but based on the energy signatures, Admiral, I think it's their command vessel, their central intelligence, the heart of the HFY collective."
"A brain ship," Vorath murmured. "They've committed their leader to this battle."
"They don't expect us to be a threat," Sivris observed. "They're not defending it. They're not hiding it. They've brought it here to witness our destruction." Vorath studied the display, trying to find some hope in the tactical situation. The Coalition fleet, 12,000 ships, was badly outnumbered. Even with the human reinforcements, they would be facing 18,000 HFY vessels that could regenerate damage, bypass shields, and seemingly multiply at will.
It should have been hopeless.
And yet, "Admiral Chen is hailing us," Sivris reported. "Put him through." Chen's face appeared on the view screen. Behind him, his command center was alive with activity, officers moving with purpose as the fleet prepared for battle. "Admiral Vorath, I'm transmitting our tactical plan to your fleet now. I want to be clear about our respective roles in this engagement." "Understood. The Coalition fleet will remain in reserve. You will not engage the HFY directly. Your ships are not equipped to survive this battle, and I will not waste lives that don't need to be lost."
Vorath bristled. "We came here to fight."
"And you will fight, if necessary. But first, we need to see what the humans can do." Chen's expression softened slightly. "You've been carrying this burden alone for 6 months. You've lost worlds, species, friends. Let us carry it for a while."
"And what will you do?"
Chen smiled, and for the first time, Vorath saw something in that smile that made him understand why humanity had hidden themselves for so long. It was hunger. "We're going to teach the HFY why they should have stayed in whatever hell they crawled out of." The human fleet advanced in perfect formation. Vorath watched from the observation deck of the Celestial Authority, which had been positioned several light minutes behind the main engagement zone. Close enough to observe, far enough to stay out of the line of fire. He had never felt more useless in his life. The 52,000 human ships moved like a single organism, each vessel maintaining precise distance from its neighbors, the entire fleet flowing through space with a grace that belied their massive size. At their head, the 12 command vessels formed the tip of the spear,
their black hulls drinking in the light of dying stars.
The HFY, predictably, began their approach.
Their fleet surged forward in a writhing mass, individual ships moving independently but somehow maintaining overall cohesion. Hive ships opened their tentacles like grasping claws, ready to seize and consume. Smaller attack vessels darted between the larger ones, seeking weak points, vulnerabilities. And behind them all, the brain ship pulsed with anticipation. "The HFY are accelerating," Kelleth reported. "They're moving to envelop the human formation." "Standard HFY tactics," Voreth observed. "Surround, overwhelm, consume." The humans aren't changing course. They're still advancing directly toward the brain ship. On the tactical display, Voroth watched the two fleets closing. At their current speeds, they would meet in approximately 7 minutes. 7 minutes until the battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. 6 minutes. 5. The HFY ships began to glow as they prepared their primary weapons, bioorganic energy projectors that had proven capable of penetrating any known shield technology. Against coalition ships, those weapons had been devastating. Against the humans, 4 minutes. Vorath found himself holding his breath. 3 minutes. The human fleet stopped. It happened so suddenly that Vorath thought the sensors had malfunctioned. One moment, 52,000 ships were advancing at full speed. The next, they were stationary, holding perfect formation as the HFY continued to approach. "What are they doing?" Sivris asked. Vorath didn't answer. He was watching the command vessels, watching as strange patterns of light began to dance across their hulls. Weapon systems, he realized. They were activating their weapons. But what weapons required 50-kilometer-long ships to fire? 2 minutes. The HFY were almost in weapons range now. Their bioorganic projectors began to glow brighter, building to firing intensity. Thousands of ships, each one capable of destroying a coalition cruiser with a single shot. 1 minute. The human command vessels spoke. Vorath would later struggle to describe what he saw. Light was involved. Light and something else. Something that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. The forward weapons arrays of the 12 command vessels flared with impossible brilliance. And then something happened that should not have been possible. Lines of annihilation stretched from the human ships to the HFY fleet. Not energy beams exactly, not missiles, something different, something that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, twisting and writhing as it crossed the void between fleets. Where those lines touched HFY ships, the ships ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not broken apart or burned or melted, simply removed. One moment they were there, organic hulls pulsing with malevolent life. The next moment, there was nothing, not even debris, not even ash. 2,000 HFY ships vanished in the first volley. "Gods preserve us," Kelleth whispered. The human fleet began to advance again, and as it did, it opened fire with everything it had. It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. The HFY had spent 6 months consuming worlds, absorbing civilizations, believing themselves invincible. They had faced the greatest fleets the Coalition could muster and swept them aside like insects. Now they faced humanity. And humanity was not impressed. The human fleet had been designed for total war, not the careful, measured conflicts that the Coalition practiced, but the absolute, uncompromising violence that had shaped human history. Every ship was a weapon. Every weapon was designed to destroy utterly. The command vessels fired their reality-bending weapons in steady, methodical volleys, erasing HFY ships by the hundreds. The battleships followed with waves of antimatter missiles, each one carrying enough destructive potential to crack a planet's crust. The cruisers and destroyers swept through the chaos, their energy weapons slicing through the regenerating hulls of HFY vessels faster than the biomatter could heal. And the HFY tried to fight back. Their bioorganic projectors finally reached firing range, and thousands of beams lanced toward the human fleet, those terrible weapons that had proven capable of bypassing any known shield technology. They struck the leading human vessels. And nothing happened. Vorath watched in disbelief as the HFY weapons splashed harmlessly against the black hulls of human ships. Not deflected, not absorbed, simply negated, as if the weapons had never been fired at all. "They're shielded against the HFY weapons," Kelleth reported, his voice shaking. "But that's impossible. We analyzed those weapons for months. There's no known technology that can—" "The humans have technology we don't know about," Vorath interrupted. "They've clearly had it for years, perhaps decades." The battle, if it could be called that, continued. Human ships carved through the HFY fleet with surgical precision, each strike eliminating targets, each maneuver designed to maximize destruction while minimizing exposure. They fought like predators, not warriors. There was no honor in what they were doing, no sense of fair combat. There was only efficiency. The HFY tried to adapt. They always did. It was what made them dangerous, their ability to analyze enemy technology and evolve countermeasures in real time. The human fleet didn't give them time. Every time a cluster of HFY ships attempted to coordinate a response, human vessels were there to break up the formation. Every time the brain ship tried to direct its forces, human electronic warfare systems jammed its signals. Every time a HFY vessel began to regenerate, human weapons struck it again and again and again until there was nothing left to regenerate. In the first hour of the battle, the HFY lost 6,000 ships. By the second hour, they had lost 10,000. By the third hour, the last of the standard HFY vessels was destroyed. Only the brain ship remained. The brain ship tried to flee. Vorath couldn't blame it. The creature, because it was a creature, a living being for all its massive size, had watched its entire fleet be annihilated, had felt, perhaps, the deaths of 18,000 vessels that were extensions of its own consciousness. It tried to open a passage to the dark spaces between galaxies, tried to return to whatever nightmarish realm had spawned it. The human fleet surrounded it. 12 command vessels, thousands of warships, closing in from every direction. The brain ship lashed out with its tentacles, trying to grab, to consume, to do the only thing it knew how to do. The human ships burned those tentacles away. Piece by piece, they dissected the brain ship. Not quickly, that would have been mercy. Slowly, methodically. They cut away its defenses, its weapons, its ability to flee. They left it helpless, drifting in the void, a 200-kilometer mass of dying tissue. And then Admiral Chen hailed the coalition fleet. "Admiral Vorath, the HFY brain ship has been disabled. We're detecting faint life signs in the central mass. The core consciousness appears to still be alive." Vorath stared at the view screen. "What do you intend to do with it?" "That's not up to us." Chen's expression was unreadable.
The Coalition has suffered the most from Keth-Vor aggression. Worlds destroyed, species consumed. We believe you should decide the creature's fate." The creature's fate. Vorath thought about the Talarians, their beautiful songs silenced forever. He thought about the Meridians of the Fourth Colony, their color language reduced to nothing. He thought about the 11 billion beings who had died screaming as they were absorbed into the Keth-Vor collective. "Destroy it," he said quietly. "Destroy it and leave nothing behind." Chen nodded. Understood. The manifest destiny turned toward the brain ship, its primary weapon array coming to life one final time. The reality-bending weapon spoke, and the last of the Keth-Vor ceased to exist. The battle was over. It had lasted less than 4 hours. 4 hours to destroy 18,000 Keth-Vor ships and their command creature. 4 hours to end a threat that had consumed worlds and erased civilizations. The human fleet had not lost a single ship. Not one. Vorath sat in his quarters aboard the Celestial Authority, staring at the wall and trying to process what he had witnessed. He had spent his entire career studying military tactics, analyzing fleet engagements, preparing for the day when his skills would be tested in battle. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. The door chimed. "Enter," he called. Sivris stepped in, his gills fluttering with barely contained emotion. "Admiral, Admiral Chen has requested your presence aboard the Manifest Destiny. He says there are things that need to be discussed." Of course there were. Chen's quarters aboard the command vessel were surprisingly simple. A bed, a desk, a few personal items. The walls were bare except for a single image, a photograph of what appeared to be a human family, standing before a blue ocean. "My wife and children," Chen explained, following Vorath's gaze. "They're on Earth, safe, because of what we did today." "Because of what you did today," Vorath corrected. "The Coalition. We did nothing. We watched." "You held the line for 6 months. You bought us time to prepare." Chen sat behind his desk and gestured for Vorath to take the opposite seat. "Without your resistance, the Keth-Vor would have spread much farther before we were ready to intervene. Many more would have died." "Many did die." "Yes, and that is our failing as much as yours." Chen steepled his fingers. "The debate I mentioned earlier, about whether to intervene at all, it was not a short debate. There were those who argued that we should let the Keth-Vor weaken the Coalition, then sweep in to defeat both. Establish human dominance over the galaxy through strength rather than diplomacy." Vorath felt a chill run down his spine. "Why didn't you?" "Because that's what the old humanity would have done. The humanity that conquered, that enslaved, that destroyed." Chen's eyes grew distant. "We fought wars on Earth that make the Keth-Vor look merciful. We invented weapons that could have sterilized our entire world. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times over." "But you didn't." "No, we changed, or we tried to. But the capacity for that old darkness is still there, Admiral. It will always be there." He met Vorath's gaze. "When I said we would teach the Keth-Vor why they should have stayed in whatever hell they crawled out of, I meant it. Not because we're heroes, because we understand hell. We built it, we lived in it, and we climbed out of it through blood and fire and unimaginable suffering." Vorath considered this. "The Coalition believed you were a minor power. We were wrong. Very wrong. Humanity controls not 19 systems, but over 3,000. Our population is not 40 billion, but 400 billion. Our fleet number's not 50,000, but 400,000, and we could build more if we needed to. Much more." Chen smiled thinly.
We hid because we were afraid of ourselves, afraid of what we might become if the rest of the galaxy saw us as a threat. But when the HFY emerged, you decided the time for hiding was over. We decided that some things are more important than our fears. Chen stood and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. The galaxy is safe now. The HFY are gone. But there will be other threats, Admiral. Other horrors lurking in the dark spaces. And when they come, humanity will be there? Humanity will always be there. Chen turned back to face him. We're offering something we've never offered before. A full alliance with the Coalition. Military integration. Technology sharing. A partnership of equals. Vorath was stunned. After everything you've hidden from us? Because of everything we've hidden from you. The Coalition taught us that there's more to civilization than war. You gave us something to protect, something worth fighting for beyond our own survival. Now, it's our turn to give something back. Chen extended his hand, a human gesture of agreement, Vorath knew. What do you say, Admiral? Ready to take on the universe together? Vorath looked at that extended hand. He thought about the battle he had witnessed, the terrible beauty of human warfare, the disciplined savagery that had erased 18,000 ships in less than 4 hours. He thought about what it meant to have such an ally. And he thought about what it meant to have such an enemy. Together, he agreed, and took the offered hand. 3 months after the Battle of the Salian Nebula, as it came to be known, the galaxy was still reeling from the revelation of humanity's true power. Coalition intelligence services worked around the clock to revise their assessments. Diplomatic Corps scrambled to establish new protocols for dealing with a species that had, overnight, become the most powerful military force in known space. Philosophers and historians debated what it all meant, whether humanity's hidden strength was a blessing or a curse. Vorath found himself at the center of much of this activity. As the Coalition commander who had witnessed the battle firsthand, he was in constant demand for briefings, interviews, and consultations. But it was the quiet moments that stayed with him. He remembered standing on the observation deck of the Celestial Authority as the human fleet departed, watching those 52,000 ships vanish into slipspace as smoothly as they had arrived. He remembered the strange mixture of gratitude and fear that had gripped him. The galaxy owed its survival to humanity. But what did humanity expect in return? The answer, it turned out, was both simple and complex. They expected partnership. Not subservience. Not tribute. Not acknowledgement of their superiority. Just partnership. A seat at the table, a voice in galactic affairs, the opportunity to be something more than the monsters they had once been. "You seem troubled," Chen had said during their final meeting before the human fleet departed. "Most species would be celebrating right now." Most species didn't just watch a force of nature disguised as a fleet annihilate an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for 6 months. Chen had laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. Fair point. But consider this, Admiral. For 73 years, humanity lived alongside the Coalition without anyone knowing what we were capable of. We traded fairly, we honored our agreements. We helped where we could and asked for nothing in return. Doesn't that count for something? It counts for a great deal, Vorath had admitted, but it also raises questions. Why maintain such a massive military force if you never intended to use it? Why build weapons capable of erasing ships from existence if you wanted peace? Chen's answer had haunted Vorath ever since. Because we know what we are, Chen had said quietly. We know that somewhere, deep in our hearts, The capacity for destruction never truly goes away. The weapons aren't there because we want war, Admiral. They're there because we know that someday, someone will come who gives us no choice. And when that day arrives, we intend to be ready.
He had paused, looking out at the stars.
The HFY weren't our first encounter with consuming species. Not really. We spent millennia consuming each other. The only difference is that we learned to stop. We learned to build instead of destroy, to create instead of consume. But we never forgot how. We never let ourselves forget. Why not? Because the universe doesn't care about peaceful intentions. It doesn't reward kindness or punish cruelty. It just is. Chen had turned to face him. The coalition has survived for 300 years through diplomacy and mutual benefit. That's admirable, truly. But it only works when everyone plays by the same rules. The HFY didn't play by those rules. And someday, something else will emerge that doesn't play by them either.
And humanity will be there.
Humanity will always be there. Chen had smiled that predator's smile. We're the galaxy's insurance policy, Admiral. The monster under the bed that other monsters should fear. That's not a role we chose for ourselves, but it's the role we were born to play. The partnership between humanity and the coalition developed slowly but steadily. Human technology began to flow into coalition hands, not the weapons that had destroyed the HFY, but the more peaceful applications of human science. Medical breakthroughs that extended lifespans, agricultural techniques that increased food production 100-fold, energy systems that could power entire planets with minimal environmental impact. In return, the coalition shared its vast cultural heritage, art and music from species that had been creating beauty for millennia, philosophical traditions that had grappled with the meaning of existence for countless generations, the accumulated wisdom of 17 civilizations offered freely to a species that had spent most of its history fighting itself. Humanity changed over the following decades. Not fundamentally, that capacity for violence, that readiness for war never disappeared, but it was tempered by exposure to the broader galaxy. Human artists began to create works that incorporated coalition influences. Human philosophers developed new schools of thought that drew on alien wisdom. Human children grew up knowing that they were part of something larger than themselves. And through it all, the fleet remained. 400,000 warships, maintained in perfect readiness. 1,000,000 soldiers trained to fight in any environment, against any enemy. Weapons capable of destroying planets, erasing species, ending civilizations. Just in case. Because humanity never forgot that the universe was dangerous. That somewhere in the infinite darkness between galaxies, something else was waiting. Something that would emerge, eventually, to test the galaxy's defenses. When that day came, and it would come, humanity knew, they would be ready. Part 7. The Long Vigil. 100 years after the Battle of Thessalian Nebula, Admiral Sarah Chen V., great-great-great-granddaughter of the original Admiral James Chen, stood on the observation deck of the TNS Eternal Vigilance, humanity's newest command vessel. At 90 kilometers in length, it was the largest ship ever constructed by any species. Its weapons could tear holes in the fabric of space-time. Its engines could cross the galaxy in weeks. Its crew numbered 500,000 souls. And it was just one of 30 such vessels in the current fleet. "Admiral," her aide called, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Long-Range Observation Network. They've detected something." Chen felt her pulse quicken. The Long-Range Observation Network was humanity's first line of defense, a series of sensor stations scattered along the edge of the galaxy, watching the dark spaces between stars for any sign of emerging threats.
What have they found?
The aide's face was pale. Ships, Admiral, thousands of them, emerging from the intergalactic void in Sector 779. Chen closed her eyes. 100 years of peace. 100 years of building, growing, hoping that the lesson of the Keth War had been learned.
But the universe didn't care about hope.
Profile? Unknown design. The ships don't match any recorded configuration, Keth War or otherwise. The aide swallowed. But they're big, Admiral. The smallest is 20 kilometers. The largest.
How large?
We're still resolving the sensor data, but initial estimates suggest something in excess of 500 kilometers. Chen opened her eyes and gazed out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a new enemy was approaching, a new threat to the galaxy that humanity had sworn to protect. She smiled. "Signal all fleet elements," she ordered. "Begin mobilization protocols. Inform the Coalition Council that humanity is moving to intercept an unknown hostile force." She turned to face her command crew, and they saw in her eyes the same look that had graced her ancestors' face a century ago. Hunger. "It's been 100 years since we've had a real fight," she said. "Let's remind the universe why that's been a bad idea." The Coalition had changed in the century since the Keth War. Gone was the comfortable complacency that had nearly doomed them. In its place was a new vigilance, a new understanding that peace was not given but earned, maintained through constant effort and unwavering readiness. But they had not become warriors, not like humanity. They had remained true to their nature, diplomats, scientists, artists, philosophers. They contributed to the galaxy's defense in their own way, developing new technologies, coordinating logistics, providing the infrastructure that allowed humanity's fleet to operate across interstellar distances. It was a partnership that worked. Both sides brought their strengths. Both sides covered for the other's weaknesses. When word came of the new threat emerging from the intergalactic void, the Coalition responded with practiced efficiency. Emergency protocols were activated. Civilian populations were evacuated from threatened systems. Defense networks were brought to full readiness. And they waited for humanity to do what humanity did best. Admiral Chen's fleet arrived at Sector 779 17 hours after the initial detection. The enemy, whatever it was, had continued to emerge from the void during that time. Thousands of ships had become tens of thousands. The largest vessel, now fully resolved on sensors, measured 573 kilometers along its primary axis. It was organic, like the Keth War had been. But where the Keth War had been crude, almost larval, these ships were elegant, beautiful even. They moved through space with a grace that belied their massive size. And they were broadcasting. "We're receiving a transmission," Chen's communications officer reported. "Universal translation protocols are having difficulty, but, Admiral, I think they're trying to communicate." Chen frowned. The Keth War had never communicated. They had simply consumed. "Put it through." Static filled the bridge, then resolved into something approaching language. "We are the shepherds of the void. We have watched. We have waited. We come seeking the ones who destroyed the devourers. We come to test." Test. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. "They know about the Keth War," she murmured. "They've been watching us, maybe for centuries." "Admiral, orders?" Chen studied the tactical display. 40,000 enemy vessels, each one massive, each one of unknown capability. Against her fleet of 12,000, including 6 command vessels.
The coalition would have called for negotiation. They would have sought common ground, tried to understand the newcomers' intentions, worked toward a peaceful resolution.
Chen was not the coalition. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All vessels, battle stations. Prepare to engage on my command." Her aide looked shocked. "Admiral, they said they want to test us. Perhaps they're not hostile. Perhaps—" "They emerged from the void with 40,000 warships," Chen interrupted. "They positioned themselves to threaten our space without any prior diplomatic contact. And they call themselves shepherds while referring to the HFY as devourers." She smiled grimly. "They're not here to make friends. They're here to see if we're worthy."
Worthy of what?
That's what we're about to find out. The battle began with a single shot. One of the Shepherd vessels, a mid-sized craft approximately 30 kilometers in length, accelerated toward the human fleet. Its intentions were unclear. Perhaps it was a probe sent to test human defenses. Perhaps it was attempting to communicate further.
It crossed into human weapons range.
Admiral Chen gave no warning, no ultimatum. She simply nodded to her weapons officer.
The eternal vigilance spoke, and the approaching vessel ceased to exist. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Shepherd fleet held position, as if processing what had just occurred. Their greatest warriors had been the HFY, perhaps, the devourers who had consumed countless civilizations across the ages, and humanity had destroyed them in hours. Now, faced with humanity's current fleet, larger, more advanced, more terrible than anything that had faced the HFY, the Shepherds were forced to reconsider their assumptions.
"They're retreating," the sensor officer reported, disbelief clear in his voice. "The entire fleet is withdrawing back toward the void." Chen watched the Shepherd ships disappear, one by one, back into the darkness between galaxies. The largest vessel, that 573-kilometer behemoth, was the last to leave. Before it vanished, it broadcast one final message.
"You have passed our test. You are worthy to stand as guardians of this galaxy. We will not return in force, but we will be watching, always watching. Grow strong, young ones. Darker things than us wait in the endless might." And then they were gone. The Battle of Sector 779, if it could be called a battle at all, became another legend in humanity's growing mythology. The Shepherds of the Void had come to test the galaxy's defenders. They had found humanity, and they had judged humanity worthy. What exactly that meant, no one knew. Perhaps the Shepherds were a force for cosmic order, testing civilizations to ensure they could protect themselves against threats that no one had yet imagined. Perhaps they were simply predators, probing for weakness, and had decided that humanity was too dangerous to challenge. It didn't matter. What mattered was that humanity had stood ready. When the unknown emerged from the darkness, humanity had been there to meet it. Not with diplomacy, not with negotiation, but with overwhelming force and uncompromising resolve. The galaxy slept safely, knowing that the monster under the bed was on their side. Admiral Sarah Chen 7 lived for another 87 years, eventually retiring to a quiet estate on New Earth, the 10th planet humanity had terraformed. She spent her final decades writing, teaching, and occasionally advising the young officers who would inherit her legacy. She never forgot the message the Shepherds had left behind. Darker things than us wait in the endless night. She made sure the fleet didn't forget it either. 300 years after the Battle of Thessalian Nebula. 500 years! 1,000. Humanity grew, evolved, spread across the galaxy and beyond, into the dark spaces that had once seemed so terrifying. They found wonders out there, ancient civilizations that had retreated from the physical universe, energy beings that existed in the hearts of stars, mysteries that would take millennia to unravel. They found threats too, more devourer-type species, rogue AI swarms, cosmic horrors that defied explanation or understanding. Each one was met with the same response that had greeted the Kethvor and the Shepherds: overwhelming force, delivered with precision and without hesitation. The galaxy learned to rely on humanity. When darkness emerged, humanity would be there. When hope seemed lost, human ships would appear on the horizon. When all seemed hopeless, human soldiers would stand in the gap. And through it all, humanity remembered what they were. Not heroes, not saviors, not noble warriors fighting for justice and righteousness. Monsters. Terrible, ancient, unrelenting monsters who had learned, through blood and fire and unimaginable suffering, to turn their capacity for destruction toward the defense of others. The galaxy was full of wonders, beautiful worlds, brilliant minds, civilizations that created art and music and philosophy that could move the soul. Humanity protected all of it, not because they were good, not because they deserved praise or gratitude or recognition, because the universe was dangerous, because something had to stand between the light and the darkness, because someone had to be willing to do the terrible things that peace-loving civilizations could not. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. That was humanity's burden. That was humanity's purpose. Epilogue: The Watcher's Report. Translated from an unknown language, recovered from a probe discovered at the edge of the observable universe, dated approximately 10,000 years after the Battle of Thessalian Nebula. They call themselves humanity. They are not the oldest species in this galaxy. They are not the wisest, or the most cultured, or the most technologically advanced. There are civilizations here that have existed for millions of years, that have achieved forms of existence that humanity cannot yet comprehend. But humanity is the one we watch. They emerged from a small, unremarkable world orbiting an average star in an outer arm of a spiral galaxy. Nothing in their early history suggested they would become what they are. They were violent, yes, but many species are violent. They were aggressive, ambitious, territorial, but so are countless others. What made them different was their choice. When they reached the stars, they found a galaxy at peace, a coalition of species that had learned to resolve their differences through diplomacy and trade, a comfortable, prosperous order that had no need for warriors. Humanity saw this peace and recognized it for what it was: fragile, temporary, an illusion maintained only because no true threat had yet emerged. So they prepared. While the coalition congratulated itself on its wisdom and maturity, humanity built. They constructed warships by the hundreds of thousands. They developed weapons capable of destroying stars. They trained their children in the arts of war, passing down knowledge of strategy and tactics from generation to generation. And they waited. When the devourers came, the ones this galaxy calls the Kethvor, humanity was ready. They destroyed the devourer fleet in hours. They saved a galaxy that had mocked them for their suspicion and their violence. And then they went back to waiting. We have watched them for 10,000 years now. In that time, they have faced 17 major threats to galactic civilization. They have defeated all of them. The galaxy has never known such sustained peace, such security, such freedom to grow and explore and create. All because humanity stands eternal watch. Some of us believe they are dangerous, that any species with such capacity for violence is a threat that will eventually turn on those it protects, that the only difference between humanity and the monsters they fight is time. Others believe they are necessary, that the universe requires guardians, beings willing to do what peaceful civilizations cannot, that humanity has found its purpose in service. I believe something else. I believe humanity is what they have always been, a species that chose to be better than its nature, a species that looked at its own capacity for destruction and decided to point it outward, toward the darkness, rather than inward, toward each other. They are not perfect. They never will be. The capacity for violence lives in them still, barely contained beneath a thin veneer of civilization. But that veneer grows thicker with each passing century. That choice, to protect rather than destroy, to defend rather than conquer, becomes more ingrained with each generation. They are becoming something new, something the universe has never seen before. A species of warriors that chose peace. A species of monsters that chose mercy. A species of destroyers that chose to create. We will continue to watch them. We will continue to study them. And perhaps in another 10,000 years, we will finally understand what they truly are. Until then, we can only marvel. The galaxy sleeps safely tonight because humanity keeps watch. Long may they continue.